Hey everybody, welcome back to Swordwolf Forge. As of late, I've been getting a lot of questions sent at me. Some of them have been about my personal hygiene. But most of them have been people asking me, how do you get into knife making or bladesmithing? These people are interested in what the craft is, but they don't know where to start. So what I've decided to do is start a whole series on getting started. This is for the new person that really doesn't know very much, doesn't have the tools, and doesn't know where to go. So we're going to do a video on each section of knife making where I can help people to get started. So this first video is going to be on tools. What tools do you need? What tools do you want? Where can I get them? Etc. So let's get started. So one of the most important tools you'll need is a shop cat. This cat is Susie. She showed up on our door about 2 years ago pregnant, and she has turned out to be my best buddy and my supervisor. You want to say hi, Susie? Okay, for the first tool we're going to be looking at is anvils. Now, one thing you want to ask yourself, and you might not be able to answer this right now because you're new to this, but do you want to forge blades, or do you want to just cut them out or do what we call stock removal? Now, there's a big difference there. Than if you're cutting out blades, you're a knife maker. If you are forging and hammering out a blade, then you're a bladesmith. Neither one's better than the other, but you'll need different tools for different jobs. So you're going to have to decide what route you want to go down. Now with me, I am a bladesmith. I forge out my blades to shape. So to do that, I need an anvil. Or it doesn't even have to be an anvil. It can be just a hard piece of steel, because especially after Forged and Fire came around, everybody wanted to be a bladesmith. And everybody started buying up these anvils, and now something that was sitting in a barn for 100 years is now worth thousands of dollars. That being said, there are several ways you can take this on. I found this anvil. This is from 1880. I found this in an antique store. Now the horn has been snapped off, and this thing has been, it looks like it's been dragged behind a tank, but it still works. And I got this for, I don't know, $225, $250. And it works for most of what I need. And you get the hardy hole and the Pritchett hole. And then I also, when I first started, a friend of mine made me this anvil. And this has just been shaped out of a piece of railroad track. Now you can find these also. There are some manufacturers out there starting to make these. I think Harbor Freight has one. I think that maybe even Viva or something. You might be able to get something economical. But you don't, again, if you're just getting started, you don't have to break the bank by going out and buying a $1,000 anvil. Get yourself a piece of like railroad track, cut it off, or have somebody cut it off for you. That will suffice for right now. But you're going to need something hard to shape the blade and to forge it out. Next thing we want to look at is forges or a heat source. Now, some of the information that I am going to go over is going to overlap some. But if you're going to be a bladesmith, you need a forge. There's no way around it. You need something to get your steel to the temperature where you can forge it. and move the steel. These two are Majestic forges, and they run on gas. I do have a coal forge. You can use a coal forge. I've made one. It's buried in a corner somewhere, so it tells you how much I use it. Just for the simple fact of, if you look inside these forges, and if you watch some of my videos, you've already seen me using these. But all that is my heating area. So I get nice heat that's uniform across the blade. It doesn't take very long to get warmed up, and I can get to forge welding temperature with these. Versus like a coal forge, it takes a long time to get heated up. You have to maintain it. You got to be keeping an eye on it the whole time. Your heat spot is not very big in a coal forge. So you're not getting uniform heat across the whole blade sometimes. You also have the potential of burning your steel with a coal forge. Now, these are Majestic forges. They're made here in Ohio. They're also the same kind of forges used on Forged in Fire. As of late, there has been a lot more manufacturers producing forges. You can get on Amazon, Viver, and purchase one of these pretty reasonable price. You're only going to spend a couple $100 on this, but this is, especially if you're going to be a bladesmith, this is mandatory. You have to get something like this. You can make them, but if you don't know what you're doing, I highly suggest you don't do it. For several reasons. Once you get into making one of these things and you're sourcing out your materials, because you need, these are lined with bricks and cement, special cement that is heat resistant. You source all that out. You got to get your air to fuel mixture correct. I really don't see the reason to build one unless you really know what you're doing. Because again, you can get one of these for a couple $100, brand new. I see these used on Marketplace all the time. So if that helps you source one of these. The other thing about it is, and I'm going to get into heat treating a little bit later, when you're knife making, you have to heat treat if you're going to do it in-house. And you're going to need, unless you have a heat treat oven, which I don't think starting out, you're not going to have one. This is the method you're going to have to use to heat treat your knives. And the heat treat is one of the most critical steps in making a good knife. And depending on the steel you have, depends on how forgiving that heat treat can be. And another video, we're going to get into steels more, okay? But if you're just getting started heat treating in a forge, you can do it. But eventually you're going to want to move up to something else that's a lot more exact. So again, this one's a 3-burner. This one's a 2-burner. You can get these all the way, 5, 6, sky's the limit. But I would suggest starting out with a 2, if that's what where you want to go. If you're just knife making, you're still going to need this to heat treat. So keep that in mind. Okay, this is a tool that I got when I first started and a tool that I use every day. And this is just a hand grinder. I remove the guard. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm not recommending you do it. But I did. These are super versatile. I do cutting with this. You can get different kinds of wheels, excuse me, to do different jobs. This is a cutting wheel. This is a flat disc wheel, so you can smooth out your work, especially if you don't have a grinder yet. This is a different kind of wheel. There's a lot of different wheels. They even come with wire wheels. And I can't find mine right now. I don't use a wire wheel that much. But getting started, I highly recommend getting a grinder. Now, when this one dies on me, I'm probably going to invest in a cordless one. But you can get these all kinds of different prices. These won't break the bank, at least the corded ones. You can get one at Home Depot. You can, again, look on Marketplace. Look on Marketplace. You'll see deals on these all the time, but I super highly recommend getting one of these. Again, especially if you don't have a grinder, because even if you're doing stock, these come in really handy for stock removal. But also if you're smithing, you're going to still have to clean up and put bevels in and everything else. And you can start out with one of these to suit your needs. Files, 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 and files. You're never going to have enough files, especially when you are starting out, when you don't have belt grinders. You're going to have to use files to remove steel, to file in your bevels, to contour things, to clean things up, to make guards if you decide to make hidden tang knives. You even need them to shape your handles. So you are going to end up with a collection of files. In regards to files, I would say you get what you pay for. I would not recommend lower brand stores when it comes to files, because they're going to wear out quick and you're just going to get more frustrated. Especially when you get into smaller files like these, I recommend just ponying up and getting yourself some better files. You want files that will cut through steel. And so that has to do with their hardness. So you're going to have to pony up a little bit on these, but you're going to need files. Now also keep in mind though, everything I'm showing you here isn't the gospel. This is what I am recommending, and this is how my shop runs. Somebody else may not recommend this kind of stuff. This is up to you, but I'm showing you how I do things. That's all, and trying to help you guide on what to purchase, what not to purchase. As you might have guessed, to do some bladesmithing, you're going to need hammers. This is only a small collection of the hammers that I use. Now, when you're going to get started, you're not going to need all of these hammers. And hammers, like anything else, can really vary in price. These things can get up to a couple $100 but they're specialized hammers. This one right here, I got it, I believe, Harbor Freight for under $30. I use this extensively for the first couple years. It's a 3-pound hammer. cleaned up the face a little bit, and it served me pretty good. But just like anything else, as you start going, you're going to want to start getting more of a collection of hammers. This is the main hammer that I use. It's a simple 3-pound cross peen. And most of my hammers now, I actually have the luxury of being not too far from Amish country. And so I go up there and get my hammers up there. And I don't spend any more than $30 on a hammer. But when you're getting started, this is probably going to be the first thing you want to acquire, is a 3-pound cross peen. And when I talk about peen, it's this area right here. And you can get all kinds of different peens, all kinds of sizes, shapes, and everything, but this is a go-to hammer. And this is shaped to help draw out steel. What you want to look for, though, if you're going to get like a used hammer, is look at the shape of the handle. Now, handles aren't that expensive, but they can be a pain to replace if you don't know what you're doing. You also want to look at the face. Are there any kind of big gouges, chunks, cracks, or anything in that? Because when you're hammering on steel, if there's a big deformation in the face, it will imprint on your blade steel. So you want to take a look at that. And if it's something minor, you can clean it up with a grinder. And you also want to keep an eye on this as you smith, because, you know, sometimes you might get a little booger or something in there, and you want to keep that dressed up as best as possible. But again, I would recommend, if you're just getting started, start out with a 3-pound cross peen. Now, this is a 3-pound cross peen, but it's got a lot shorter handle on it. And I use that sometimes. You know, each hammer has a different purpose. Here's one that I kind of like. This is a straightening hammer. And I just put a new handle on this, and I made this myself too. These can be pretty expensive. But what I did was I just bought I can't even remember what ounce this is. It's not very big, off of Amazon. I drilled out a 3/8 hole in the peen, and then I epoxied this carbide bearing in there. And what this will do is, if you get a warped blade, it will straighten out. And I have a couple videos of me using this in my shop. So again, rule of thumb with me is I'm not a cheapie, but I'm not going to sit there and, especially if you're new, blast a whole bunch of money for something you can buy for $20 or $30. Another thing you can do is look on Marketplace. I know I've been mentioning that a lot, but I shop on Marketplace all the time. You can find barn finds on there, garage sales, whatever. And I mean, honestly, if you're not a blacksmith or a bladesmith, these people don't even know what these are. This is a brass hammer that I use sometimes. It won't mar up the steel as bad. So again, start slow, get yourself a 3-pound cross peen, and then start building yourself a collection if you want to. Next thing I want to talk about is vises. You're going to need some kind of vise to hold your blade, straighten it out. There's numerous times that I use a vise every day. Now, if you can see here, I've got a couple different variations of vise. I got this when I first started. A buddy of mine sold it to me for pretty cheap, but it's a 500-pound industrial vise. This is the handle I got on it. I use this quite often, and I'll tell you, this is amazing if I need to straighten out a blade. But these are pretty hard to find, and they're very hard to move around. I have to use an engine hoist to move it around. But you can get yourself, if you're getting started, just get yourself something like this. You can get these at Harbor Freight. This is more of like a machinist vise, but I use that sometimes when I'm drilling, or like on the drill press, or I even use this for my knife sharpening. Another option you can go with is a blacksmith post vise. For a while there, these started really going up in price, but they're starting to come back down. You can get a reasonable one for within $150 to $200. Now, I've been restoring this. When I got this, this was just one big solid piece of rust. I've got it working. I've took it all apart, got it working good. I've just yet to mount it because it mounts to a workbench. This will bolt to a workbench. And then if you look at this leg, this transmits all the energy. So you can hammer on this. This will take a hammering, and this is what this leg is for, to transmit that energy into the ground. And if you're looking for one of these, I see them all the time on Marketplace. But you can also find them in antique stores. And again, what you want to look for is the condition of the jaws. This is a little bit catty corner, so I might have to adjust it, but the jaws don't look too bad. And also, if you're going to be having like a good blade in there, you could put a piece of leather in there so it doesn't mar up your blade. This plate, you want to make sure that's in good shape. If not, you could probably make one. And one of the big keys is this is actually like a spring. It is a spring. And you want to look at, one, is it even there? Okay, because this helps the vise move back and forth. If it's there, make sure it's not cracked. Again, also, if you kind of know what you're doing, you can make a new spring. But that's what you want to look for if you get a blacksmith leg vise. So again, you don't have to start out big. My advice would be go to Harbor Freight or go to a yard sale or something. Get yourself one of these at least. You can mount this to a bench, start out with that, and then work your way up. But you're going to need a vise. Whether you're, again, straightening out a blade, putting on a handle, you're hand sanding, whatever, you're going to need something to hold the steel. Now, the next tool I'm going to show you or suggest you get is a drill press. You're going to need this when you're drilling the pinholes in a full tang knife. If you're making a hidden tang knife, you're going to have to drill out your handle material. And you can do that with a hand drill, but I highly do not recommend it. The nice thing about a drill press is it's going to go straight down. It's guided. You're not going to be drilling to an angle accidentally. Because when you put your handle scales on, you want those pinholes to be straight in your stock and in the blade itself. Eventually, you might want to get a 3-2-1 block. These come in handy with keeping everything nice, straight, and level. Nice little vise to hold things better. I don't know if anybody's heard of the propeller of death. But sometimes you can be drilling out a blade and the drill bit catches and it starts spinning your knife blank at 100 miles an hour, and that's pretty scary. We'll go over that more when we do our build series, when we get to that point. But these are, again, it's what you want to pay for them. You could go to Harbor Freight and get one for a real reasonable price. Marketplace is another place to look. Get it used, especially if you're just starting out. Don't break the bank and go out and buy $1,000, heavy industrial drill press. Because I even with what I do, it's not industrial. You know, I don't need that. And, you know, this is like a table mounted version, but I put it on a stand. But sooner or later, you're going to want to get yourself a drill press and some good high-speed drill bits. Now, down the road in this build series, we are going to be making a knife, and we're going to get to the point where we have to heat treat. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about heat treating right now. We're going to dedicate pretty much a whole video just on that. But if you're going to follow this series, I don't want to, you know, you get to video 4 or 5 and, oh, I need to get this. So I'm just going to briefly tell you, this is something that if you're just getting started, how to heat treat the best way you can. It's not the best way, but it's the most economical way, especially if you're getting started. What you need is a piece of 2x2 tubing. And this is just a Type K thermometer. And you can get these on Amazon. They're not super expensive. And I haven't used this in years. So I need to change the battery in it. But I just want to show you this. And then you want to get like this thermal probe. So what it does is you're going to stick this piece of tubing in the forge. And what that does is it creates a more even heat inside here for when we're heat treating. You'll stick the probe in there along with your blade, and then you'll be able to monitor the temperature inside. And it just makes it a lot more efficient than having hot and cold spots on your blade. This acts like a kind of like an oven. So it kind of, again, regulates that heat a lot better, makes it more even throughout here. And so if you don't have a heat treat oven, which if you're just getting started, you're not going to have one. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're pretty pricey, but if you're going to start doing this long term, that's eventually what you want to work up to. But this is a good way to start, okay? You're going to have less than, you might have $50 wrapped up into this when it's all said and done. And to get a good heat treat, you're going to have to at least do this. So if you have any questions on some of this stuff, just leave a comment below, and I'll do the best to point you in the right direction for some of this stuff. Next thing on the list, I'm gonna kind of share with you my progression with sanders. Sanders aren't a must, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you're going to do this even hobby-wise, you're going to want to get a grinder slash sander, okay? I've seen people file in their bevels and stuff such like that. That does not interest me whatsoever. That seems super time-consuming and just hard on the body. So this is actually the first sander I purchased. I think I've used it more on woodworking than I have knife making now. This is just basically one step up above hand filing, in my opinion. It does remove some steel, but I mean, if you look here, it's impossible to get a plunge line ground in with this thing, with this in the way. It's not too bad with handles. And you do have this disc sander on the side that kind of helps out flatten everything out. But it's, between me and you, I really wouldn't bother going down this path unless you're going to use it for something else. I quickly jumped to a grizzly knife maker. Now this has been modified a couple times. There's a couple sites that you can get like a new platen set. I even made a small wheel attachment for this. I used this for like almost 10 years. They're roughly about $700. It is a 2x72, and it does have a buffer on it too, which I still use the buffer attachment. It's a 2x72. You can get your plunge. I made a lot of knives on this grinder. A couple downsides on this though. This has one speed only. And it only goes in one direction. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other cons to it per se, but again, I was able to make quite a few knives with this grinder. And again, I still use it somewhat today. Now, as of late, you don't have to spend that much if you want to just get started grinding. I'm not sponsored by Harbor Freight or anything like that, but they've got, you know, several different kinds of grinders out there now. Like a 1x42 or something like that. Let's see here. A 2x42, 1x30. You know, those are good. Yeah, and I don't think they're over $100. Those are good to get started with. Belts aren't super expensive, and at least you start understanding how to use them, because there's a huge learning curve to grinders. There really is. And it will take you a long time to get that down. But especially if you're just getting started, you don't want to break the bank, and you don't know if you're really wanting to do this or not, it's a lot easier to spend that kind of money than $700 or thousands of dollars on grinders. Because I just progressed up to this Ameribraid. And I just love this thing. But that being said, though, it's not something I would recommend somebody new to the hobby or the craft spending the money on. I would start with, again, like a smaller, like 1x40 grinder. Get to know it. Then maybe try to find a grizzly or something similar to this used. You can see find these used on Marketplace. But if you're going to be doing this as a hobby, you're going to want to get a grinder eventually. It's not a must, but it is something that it's one of the main tools in my shop, I think. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a message or a comment below. I will get back with you. I know a lot of this can be overwhelming per se, but also you have to equate also the cost of belts with these things too. Belts can be anywhere from $10 all the way up to $30. And you got to factor that into whatever you want to call it, your consumables in the shop, like rags and everything else. They are consumables. They don't last forever. Matter of fact, some of these belts don't last very long at all. Okay, the next item on the list of things you're going to need. I didn't know if I should put this in the consumables or have a separate section. I think I just got to do a separate section. This is sandpaper and abrasives. Okay, if you're going to be doing knife making or bladesmithing, you're going to have to finish and clean up the product. And you are going to need sandpaper, and more sandpaper. You're going to have different types of sandpaper. We've got, this is 220, roll of it, 400. Here's some 400 right here. I go all the way up to, when I'm hand sanding, it depends on what I'm making. But when I make powder weld steel or powder in Damascus, I sand it all the way up to 2000, hand sanding. And then I'll take it over to the buffer. And you have to do that in increments. You don't just go from 220 to 2000. You got to go 220, 400, 600, 800, 1500. That's how I do it. And some of this can be pretty expensive. Like the Rhino Wet, it's really good sandpaper, but it's really expensive. So what I would suggest in the beginning, and this is what I did, was just you go to Ace Hardware and get yourself a packet of 220, 400, or whatever you think you're going to need. And then once you start making and decide what you want to do, then you can go up to the more expensive stuff. It does last longer, but like this book of sandpaper costs $50, and that's not something I would have ponied up when I'm just getting started. Another thing you want to get is some sanding blocks. And I even make some of my own. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. And when we get into hand finishing, we'll talk about this a lot more. But you're going to have a small section of your shop with just dedicated to abrasives. And that's not including the, your belts for your belt sanders. Last but not least, we're going to talk about safety and personal protective equipment, or PPE. The most important tool in your shop is yourself, and you need to protect it. I'm going to show you some of the things that I suggest and what I use in my shop. The first thing that I do when I have a class is show everyone where all of the safety equipment is. I do a walk around of the shop, and I let them know that anything in this shop and everything in this shop is trying to kill you. I mean, let's face it, this equipment can really hurt somebody. So, starting out, you see my apron that I use when forging especially. And I highly suggest some gloves. Also, make sure when you get these, now these are kind of worn out, but when you get these gloves, make sure they are for forging or heat resistant. I've purchased gloves before that I really wasn't careful about what I was selecting, and when they got near heat, they about shrink wrapped around my hand. And so now I've got this large amount of heat on my hand and this glove that I can't get off. So you want to be careful about that. If you've noticed in some of my videos, though, I do not wear a glove on my hammer hand because I just can't get a good grip on the hammer with a glove on. I'm going to leave that up to you to decide. But it's something, gloves, you're going to need gloves. I have a fire blanket along with a fire extinguisher, and something you're going to need to have is a first aid kit. And also make sure that you keep that up to date, replenish supplies as you use them, and make sure that any kind of medications or anything like that in there don't have expiration dates, because the last thing you want is to find out that you do not have any Band-Aids, etc. Eye protection. At least have some safety glasses. And I've had steel in my eye. And let me tell you, when they dig that out of your eye, when you're conscious, it is not something you want to experience. So at least wear safety glasses when grinding, when forging, or any other time you think you might need them. Even when you're sanding, not hand sanding, but sanding on a grinder or something like that, getting wood dust in your eye, it's not a good day. Now, a step up would be a respirator. Like I use this quite a bit when I'm on especially on my 2x72 grinder. I have eye protection and I have lung protection. Because some of the dust that you kick up, especially from, well, from anything, can get in your lungs and long-term damage. I had a friend of mine who was a bladesmith. He passed away from lung cancer. So protect your lungs. And you can also get these masks as well. They do a pretty good job as well. But you really want to be conscious again about any kind of dust particles, even if you have a dust collection system. It's not 100%. Protect your lungs. Boots and outerwear. But boots. I've had so many times, when you're forging, your feet's going to get pounded by hot metal, slag, whatever. Wear some good leather boots. And I've had, I've worn shoes before, which was dumb, had a piece of metal go in them, and now you're living with it. And by that time, you're trying to figure out how to get that shoe off the quickest, and it's already done the damage. I may have forgotten some stuff in here, but this gives you kind of a simple rundown now of some of the personal protective equipment you want to purchase, have on hand, be familiar with, and utilize. And again, if you think of anything that I'm missing, please let me know in the comments. But at the end of every video, I say stay sharp, but also please stay safe. So this is going to conclude this video. I know we covered a lot of topics and a lot of different tools and everything, but don't get overwhelmed. This all doesn't have to be purchased at one time. And I did give you several different options to be able to find these things. Also, another thing you could do is if you have a neighbor or a friend that has that tool, borrow it or ask them how it's used. Another thing you can do is get involved with some groups. There's bladesmithing groups all around the nation. They do hammer-ins. You can go and see what these tools do. You can see if that's something you can use immediately or something that you can put off for a while. That's all up to you. But just remember, again, don't get overwhelmed. And if I can do it, you can do it. It just takes time. Now, I didn't cover everything. I'm sure that I might have missed something. If there's something that I missed, leave it in the comments below. Or if there's something you'd like to see me cover, leave it in the comment below. One thing I did not cover is sharpening supplies. That's because I'm going to have another video in this series dedicated just to sharpening. So again, this is going to be the first video of this series. The next video I'm going to be doing is covering steels. How to choose what steel you want, what to look for, what not to look for, and especially, again, it's going to be aimed at the beginner. So you definitely want to tune into that next video. So until I see you again, stay sharp, everybody.